Hello, everyone, and welcome to Osquery Office Hours. Here we are towards the end of May. It's a nice day here in Boston. Hopefully, it's nice where the rest of you are. So, welcome. Um, Sounds like Mike can't talk much today, so we'll attempt to fill in for Mike. And we'll start off with the announcements section. I don't know if anyone's got any announcements.
Yeah, I guess I'll just announce, welcome to Mozu, who's started
Hey, everybody.
on the team at Fleet, and Mo's going to be focused from the product side on particularly the agent kind of stuff that we're doing. So, expect to see a lot more of Mo around the community, helping us coordinate and plan and prioritize our efforts around Osquery and the other open source agent stuff that uh, folks are somewhat aware of, such as Orbit.
Hi,
Welcome, Mo.
thank you. It's great to meet you all. Looking forward to hopping on. So really excited.
Oh, welcome. Any other announcements? If not, next section is any questions, issues, PRs people want to discuss. The intent here is kind of an uh, open section for people to talk about. Anyone have any questions? Broad community input. Okay, sounds like no random questions from the crowd. Um, Moving on to agenda. First item we have here is OSQuery 5.3. Mike said he can't talk, but I would bet that this is Mike saying, "Can we cut a 5.3?" Um,
Yeah, so that remaining uh, one of the remaining issues or to do is provide some information around how we treat dependencies in
there's no
queries,
reason we have to block 5.3 on that.
etc., etc. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can just kick that forward. I had been kind of holding off until I could review Eco1's SSH authorized keys thing, and now reviewing it, I think it might need another go around. So I kind of just want to cut 5.3. Stefano, you just opened like a bunch of PRs in the last couple of days. Do you want to get? I think a bunch of those I approved. Some of them I had questions about. Do you want to try and push any of those in, or should we just cut 5.3, or how do you want to do that?
I mean, for the the approved one, definitely we can throw it in. The other one, which is important, is the other one that has the milestone on it, which is about removing the CLI flags on the osquery example.conf. I think I answered, and to give you an answer also here, yes, we still have flags that are marked as flag, but they should be CLI flag. I still haven't gone through the full list. I was targeting that to be done after 5.3.
Okay.
So yeah.
I would say if you're going to remove it from the example config, we should just change it to CLI flag as well at the same time. You can do it in the same PR.
I see. Yeah.
Like
okay.
I'm not suggesting big work.
Yeah.
Just just do
I can
that.
do that.
I'll approve that. That seems
Sorry,
good.
just to make sure I'm following. Did you guys say CLI as in CLI?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
The CLI underscore flag. All right, cool. Thank
yeah.
you.
Sorry, I think this is more Italian than anything. Yeah.
Also,
Thank you.
in case people don't know, we had started setting up. So for a very long time, CLI flags and flags had the same behavior. This is not what is documented, and this is not correct. So 5.3 is going to start including warning messages if you have a CLI flag in your configuration, and then 5.4 is going to reject it. So there's actually a couple rounds of deprecation happening there. Right now, I think they're just ignored, but we could tell people.
That's great.
I did see one pretty simple bug that I saw go in. What was that? I don't know if anyone's looked at 5604, but I don't think they've signed the CLA yet. So maybe that'll just land in 5.4. Yeah. Stefano, do you want 7600 to merge? Fixed shared resource accessing uninitialized variables.
Oh yeah, I was saying yes. This one I think it's
Okay.
can go. Yeah.
So that's approved already.
Yeah, I could have gone either way in this one or the next one, so I did not have any. Yeah.
No, seems pretty
Any priority.
reasonable. I feel like there's a bunch of kind of new table, new feature work, and I want to kick that forward just because I think we're right up. If we're about to cut a 5.3, I don't want to try and review some of that. I'm excited to see it. I just don't want to try and get that into this release. I'm thinking about like the new password policy table, the unified access logging. I don't know what the Windows MBCS support is. Possibly the macOS kernel panic table. I feel like it'll probably land in 5.4. So I don't know if you want to kind of just, I guess, merge those pretty simple small things, Stefano, and then we'll cut a 5.3.
I will also update the changelog.
Yeah, that one we usually do after we cut the release. Otherwise, it's kind of a pain in the neck to get them lining up. So no big deal either way on that one. Okay. Mike, how does that answer your question? I think we should merge Stefano's stuff and then we should cut 5.3. Okay. Hopefully that was an adequate channeling, Mike. Next up, I would like to re-raise the issue of pack depreciation. So one of our customers said to us that they were running the macOS attack pack, and that is, they assumed that that meant they had all of the detection they could ever need. And we were kind of like, no. For those of you that don't have this context, Osquery ships some packs. They have not really been updated in most of the life of Osquery, and they are certainly not well maintained for threat detection. The previous times we brought this up, we've talked about how we maybe really wanted to ship some packs, and I don't remember why, and how they're sort of useful as examples of how to write a pack. I think we should stop shipping them. I think we should move them into a repository and kind of just label them as like, take this as inspiration, go nuts, and not ship them as part of our packaging. But I'd love to hear counterpoints.
I could get on board with not shipping them as part of the packaging, but I'd advocate for just leaving them in this normal repo and documenting in the repo that they're there as examples.
Why the same repo? Like I'm thinking about creating a learn repo and then kind of dropping like the packs there, but maybe that's overambitious.
I guess to me, it's like, why another repo? And why not let people, especially if we'll end up with like additional complications around CLA or something. And also just why not let people, be able to be like, oh, if I contribute to the packs, then I can put Osquery on my pinned repos on GitHub. Like, I don't know, any little thing that makes it easier for someone to contribute or more likely to find the stuff, I think is worthwhile, unless we think it has real harm in being in the repo.
Sounds somewhat like arguing from a mono repo perspective.
Yeah.
Which is something that resonates with me, like a criticism, just to like understand the point you're coming from.
Yeah, I think so. it's something that we're trying to do at Fleet, and that I'm adopting into my perspective on best ways to do things. But I definitely recognize there are trade-offs to every approach, and I don't feel super strongly about it.
I guess I don't either. We haven't really embraced that in the Osquery project, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't. Um, Ultimately, though, it sounds like you're in favor of not shipping them anymore, also, and documenting them a little bit differently.
In the packaging, I think it makes sense.
And anyone else have feelings about shipping or not shipping them in the packaging?
I just definitely agree on not shipping them. Where to keep them,
Okay.
either way, it's fine for me. Yeah.
It sounds like none of us remember why we thought we should ship them, and there's at least 3 people who think we should stop shipping them. So,
Well,
Yeah, I agree.
4 people. So,
probably at the start they were more maintained, but now, yeah.
Yeah, I think at the start they were more maintained, and the other thing would be, and I'm just trying to paint some color into this in retrospect, so it could be wrong, but maybe it's also that there were no management servers for Osquery, so in order to actually do anything with Osquery, you had to have some packs, and so maybe shipping some packs by default made it easier for someone to get any value out of Osquery at all. But now that we have, various commercial products, and, and live queries are a thing, and management servers are a thing, I think it's definitely changed the value there.
the last time we talked about this, though, that was still all true. Like a year ago and like 2 years ago. So I don't know.
2 years ago, maybe we still thought that people were going to really start contributing packs, and
I will either put up a PR or try and figure out how to coerce someone else into doing the CMake work. But it sounds like there's consensus, so we should just do it. So thank you all. I assume no one else wants to say anything else about that, and we can move on. It looks like people have some new tables that maybe they want to talk about. Charvel, password policy.
Yeah, I added the password policy table on macOS. It basically tries to mimic the PW policy command line tool. Doesn't make any private API calls. It's all present in Open Directory. The API is available from 10.10 till now, hasn't been deprecated, and seems to work well whether a Mac is enrolled in MDM or not. And I think it would be good to have that data.
That seems reasonable to me. Is there other data that lives next to this that's interesting? I feel I don't quite know what I want to ask. Like if this was MDM and you're examining a policy, I'd ask if there's a more general MDM policies.
Those are private APIs. This just queries the Open Directory local node, basically Apple's layer, kind of an abstraction layer on users and groups. The profiles kind of have private frameworks, so didn't really work on it. I'm kind of going through like the US NIST, macOS security, and CIS kind of handbook to see if there are other things that we can query and get. But I think this at least provides, whether you need alphanumeric, whether you need like a minimum length, whether you need,
No, it seems strange. I'm just thinking about like if it's an open directory, then are there other open directory things we should be querying?
So Open Directory has things like, your profile photo, your shell, other attributes. I'll have to look at the headers to figure out what else is there.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's more kind of around that we can grab. But just wanted to at least have this that works. It's tested across versions of macOS and on Intel and M1.
Seems reasonable. I'll try and review it, or someone else can. The other caveat that I assume is true for macOS is that you can detect policy, but not whether a given account complies with policy that was set after the account was created. So there's some weirdness in actually CIS benchmark detection, which I think everyone just ignores. But
so if the payload is pushed via MDM profiles, then I think it's reasonable to kind of make sure that the MDM kind of does the heavy lifting of like actually enforcing it.
No. What I mean is, as far as I know, while you can set policy, you can't. And sometimes you can also say everyone has to change their password to comply with the new policy. You can't easily examine an existing account to understand if it complies with policy. You sort of just have to assume that it does. So it's a little weird, but
okay, I'll try to test that out. But yeah, and try to think about
I wouldn't
what else
bother.
can we do.
Like, this is the policy that's set. It seems reasonable to present the information that we have.
Like in my testing, I did use like PW policies, set account policies, and give it a P list, and it works. Like it'll like complain if whatever, or if you like request like on next login change the password, you'll see that policy added. Like this doesn't set policies; it's just gets the policies and displays it to you. But
That seems totally reasonable. Thank you for contributing it.
yeah.
Well, I'm excited to add it. But I'm also quite excited about the macOS Unified Logging PR, which is our next agenda item. I don't know if someone put this on the agenda, so I don't know if Daniel, you wanted to talk about it. Someone else wanted to talk about it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Why not? After discussing on the Slack channel, we checked that it wasn't possible to set a limit on the query. So I think the best way was to limit the amount of rows that the query returns, was to establish a flag. So it's it's a limit for that. So that's the the only really thing I did in that PR, because the rest of the work has been done by the guy Pafifit, which is no longer between us, and Gareth Reed, and also Mike. And Mike or was maybe, sorry, yeah, I don't know. Maybe Mike asked if it can be the functionality can limit the amount of rows returned by the table, because the data grew a lot. To prevent from getting so much data, we must establish a limit. So that's why I came with a flag, which stops the loop and prevents from getting too much. And the other feature that I did for that is a sequential some kind of sequential accessing for the logs, to get all the logs for a aggregation system. So the thing is that the table stores the last log that it has sent with the timestamp. So if you query sequentially, you get sequential logs. So if you continually querying that table, you get all the logs from the table in the order that we created.
Could you? I don't quite understand. Are you saying it remembers the sort of last seen state?
Yes.
So it's a little bit like an evented table behaviorally.
Yeah, some kind of.
Yeah, when you do a select star, it gets all the logs until from the last retrieval to now, which though means that yeah, it has maybe an interaction with queries that are scheduled and queries that are coming through the distributed queries. So you have to be aware that if you're doing a distributed query with a select star, yeah, you are affecting then the scheduled query results. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know. It seems fine. I wouldn't necessarily expect a select star on the table from distributed query or like ad hoc query. I would expect more using a constraint, a timestamp. And in that case, I think the table does return all the logs from, I mean, it evaluates the constraints and it doesn't filter out any log beyond the constraint.
Yeah, that's it. It only applies if any constraints are sent to the table by the query.
So does this sort of behavior only apply on a bare select star?
Yes.
Okay.
So the thing is that I understood that if you select everything from the table, is like you want everything. But since we are limiting the number of rows you can get from the table, we have to make some mechanism to prevent from that. So to help the user, because the user is not going to store the lights timestamp he gets from the table and then reconstruct rebuild the query. So it's like a helper function.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking about it. It's interesting because that feels like it feels like a change from the way most things in Osquery work, and I always feel like those are things we should think through pretty carefully. Right, like in evented tables, we have that optimization, right, where it'll kind of keep track of last state, and that's true across, regardless of what the constraints are, right? And I assume it tracks a pointer per query. I don't remember how that's implemented. So bringing
It's
that
on the logs, yeah, it's later, but yeah.
Yeah. So bringing that functionality into a non-evented table is interesting. It kind of makes sense because like this is almost evented under the hood, but it's weird because it's like this dramatic, it's like a shift in expectations.
Yeah, the thing here is like we don't get the data into the rock DB. We relying on the macOS mechanism to store all the logs, which I don't know if we can we can use it for that, because I don't know if the macOS will delete eventually some logs, but well, it's an idea, and I think it's not a bad idea.
Well, it's not a bad idea. I just get concerned when we change assumptions that kind of, it's just weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and it's something that I've thought about from the perspective of maybe it was the ASL table or maybe it was the unified log table. So definitely a very similar context to this, and wondered. So I just dropped into chat like the one sort of UX idea that I've considered for this, where we could perhaps implement like a custom function that could return the last timestamp that was used. So if a user wants to have this kind of behavior, they can explicitly do that by using some syntax like this. Whereas otherwise, they'll always get the most recent 100 or something like that. Another thing that I wonder about is, are you storing this time, like the timestamp that you're using, are you storing that in RocksDB? So does it persist across Osquery restarts?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure what I think. So I also raised some of the issues around like what would a bare select star do on the earlier implementations of this table, right? How do we prevent that from kind of just melting OS query memory footprint? And naively, you could almost just say you get the last 10 minutes of logs, right? Like return the last 10 minutes of logs. It doesn't matter. It's just something so that, if you do the simple thing, like does this table work, you get some data back. And I'm almost like if you sort of have select star change behaviors, and every time you run it, you'll get different data, potentially no data. Right? If you ran it twice in quick succession, you'd get no data. But I mean, macOS is pretty noisy, so maybe that'll never happen. I don't know. I'm worried that this feels very clever in a way that feels like it will confuse someone, maybe me.
What would happen if, for example, you run select star from unified log scheduled every minute or something? Because you're like, oh yeah, I want a consistent stream of those logs. But actually, I think a lot more than 100 logs get logged per minute. Do we start to lag behind, and then at some point, are folks missing logs unexpectedly?
Yeah. If there are too much logs, at some point you won't get won't be able to get track of them. So you will getting the logs from, I don't know, last hour, but not the most recently logs.
It reminds me that another thing that we've done for tables where they've sort of bare select star without any constraints could be interpreted to generate a lot of data. We've also said it just generates nothing. Like the file table, for example, returns this set of empty results if you provide no constraints. And I wonder if, rather than leaving the select star as either actually select everything, which we know is going to shoot people in the foot because there's way too much, which is, I assume, why you didn't do that. And then I think there's this strategy, which makes it under some circumstances work as expected. I wonder, but only some certain circumstances, and someone has to really understand like what the semantics are here in terms of what that limit is and how that timestamp is modified and how it's affected by if you're using live queries at the same time against that table versus scheduled queries. Like maybe just go with the thing where it consistently returns nothing, and if you want results, you have to provide constraints. Or and I guess maybe all of that is to say is, did y'all see or hear from someone that they want to ship everything from this from the unified log, and is that where this kind of motivation comes from?
Yeah, my company wants to get all uploaded.
So like, what is do you expect to run a scheduled query against this table like every few seconds?
No, well, I don't really know, but like every 5 minutes or something like that.
So I guess I'm stuck on like, if you were to run the select star every 5 minutes, you will definitely end up losing a lot of logs because way more than 100 logs are generated every 5
Well,
minutes.
I will have to adjust the limit by setting the flag. So if I
A
if
command
I
command
cannot,
line flag.
yeah, Yeah, the limit is
Yeah. But that's sort of, sorry, I'm shaking my head a bit because just to maybe continue what Zach is going, that means if you wanted to use this to extract all the logs, you have to both set your scheduled queries appropriately and understand
Mhm.
what's happening and adjust your configured flags. And that feels like a lot to, it's like a big ask of someone to understand the very specific implementation. Um, I almost wonder if we can like tweak this and go in a very I almost wonder if there's a different direction to go in. I don't remember what we did for Windows, where we say, okay, no constraints possibly means you get, you get no results, or maybe you just get the last 5 minutes of results. I don't know. Either way seems okay. And then we also find a way to fake an evented table. It looks like Charvel just had the same comment, right? Of like, is there a way we could set up some kind of background loop here that could feed an evented table, and then you'd have event table semantics for for the use case of wanting to extract all the logs. That feels like where we would want to push towards evented tables.
I didn't know that mechanism. So, but yeah, probably it's a better idea. Yeah, better to understand.
It won't be supernatural, like it won't be really easy because it's not an evented API, but maybe there is an evented API. I don't know.
We can kind of do a run loop as a proof of concept. See, I'm sure there will be some data loss, but it won't be too much, and it'll just like it'll poll every whatever duration, and mimic a kind of evented API from that point of view. The publisher would have to kind of set up the state and kind of do that, but I don't know, maybe that's the way to go.
I feel like if the goal is to try and capture all of the logs with some kind of filter expression, then we should probably push that in the evented direction because that is the Osquery model for it, and not try and overload a normal table select star behavior. So I that's probably what I'd say. And if the answer to making an evented table is to fake an event loop, then I don't know. I guess we fake an event loop, with some figuring out the right way to do that. But I think I'm very wary of trying to create a narrower kind of get everything that I haven't seen yet on the normal tables. And it's a very narrow use case because if you follow that pattern in the evented tables, you get lots of other functionality where like you get that semantics for things that aren't just a select star, right? You get it for right, you end up like tracking that per query. So, one query might be select star where severity is error more, right? And the evented system, I assume, handles that under the hood. So there's kind of a lot of neat tracking on that.
I mean, a big disadvantage to the evented part, though, especially when it comes to something like unified log, is like the system is already storing this into log files, and so we're duplicating that effort.
Yeah. But I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, it would kind of be to create an implementation of the evented table that actually just passed all of the data onto the underlying system table and tracked the pointers for you. And that sounds like a lot of work, maybe.
What if you could you do something like run as a differential query, always run select star from unified log where timestamp is greater than now minus 5 minutes, and then let the slight overlap that you might have due to like the schedule intervals kind of overlapping be handled by the differential query system?
Yeah, sure. What I'm worried about is if you filter by a window, a timestamp window, you don't really prevent the table from getting so much data. I mean, at the startup, I've seen that the unified logging system creates like 400 events in less than a second. So, well, but maybe it's not too much. I don't know.
Is that when you say at startup, are you talking about like when the computer turns on? Startup?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I just want to say, to be clear, like I can understand why you might want to do this, or I don't know exactly why you want all of the unified log, but it seems like I'd like to find a way that allows you to do that if that's something that you want to do. So I'm just trying to brainstorm the best way to like fit it into how Osquery works without kind of violating the expectations of how tables usually return data.
Yeah, I know it's not the expected functionality for a select query, but I don't know. I came with that idea, and I think, oh, this is funny.
It's very clever. I mean, Zach, your comment in chat is a little bit interesting. Where like, what if we define some sort of function? The thing I'm not sure about is it might not need to be a function. It might not be able to be a function because it would be meaningless to call that function in another context.
Mm.
So it might end up just being like a magic string that effectively gets parsed as a variable.
Could it be a column?
Well, I was thinking like what if you just said where timestamp greater than quote last query timestamp close quote? The underlying table implementation would have responsibility for knowing what that means because it's just coming in as a string.
Oh, I see. I see. Yeah. I like.
I don't know if I like it. It's kind of disgusting in a data model way.
It's it's an interesting idea though, for sure, because SQLite will allow you to put any data type
You could use
for any
-1
column.
if we want it to be an integer, right? But it's basically like some kind of sentinel value there to trigger this behavior.
Right. I think that is definitely an interesting idea.
It's interesting. I don't know if it's good.
I mean, I think the thing that I'm really looking for is how do we make it so that the standard user can comprehend the behavior if they just go, okay, there's a unified log table, let me use it. I think that we've set the expectation that some tables, if they'll return way too much data, they just return nothing if you don't provide the constraints. So what you just proposed, Seth, would allow us to say select star from unified log returns nothing. But if you do select star from unified log where timestamp is greater than quote last timestamp or whatever, then I could, yeah, then someone actually, in order to get in that case, like someone would have had to actually read the documentation to see that, and so it doesn't violate sort of the default behavior of the table being consistent with what people expect from other tables.
Yeah, and there's a lot of semantics there that I don't know. Like, is it the last access on the table or the last access on the table with that named query or the last access on the table with a hash of the constraints?
Yeah,
We're back in reinventing evented tables.
right, but yeah, I mean we are, but I think, I mean, but I think that like what Daniel is coming to here is important. Like this data is already stored. There's like it seems like we'd have to abuse things even further to get to like turning this into an evented table by like artificially creating, like an evented API for it, and then by duplicating the data that's written and that kind of thing. So it's like, it seems like no matter what, in order to achieve something that seems reasonable to me, we're going to have to do something that doesn't feel quite perfect. And so I lean towards using that idea that Daniel came up with, but just finding some way to make that not the default behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, Daniel, what do you think of that? Does that seem like it could work for your
Yeah.
use case?
Yes, it's I also look into sending a special character, but I didn't find any better than that. So, but yeah, I now realize that the timestamp greater than now is well. So we have to check some things because what if there is some delay between the sender and the receiver, but. Yeah, sounds good.
Well, I think this would not be the same as timestamp greater than the now thing, which I was suggesting earlier. I think this would be, well, actually, let me just type what I understood of what Seth said into the chat here to make sure that we're all on the same page. So it'd be something like select star from unified log where timestamp is greater than last timestamp or something like that, like with the actual string last timestamp, and then in the generate function for the table, it would go, oh, there's a string here for last
Okay.
timestamp. Let me do the behavior, which is essentially exactly the behavior that you did before, or that you have currently there, Daniel.
Okay, so you say last time is done, as you could say potato.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so there's actually a lot of interesting questions that this raises. So one of them is that if we wanted to be typed, then this is probably an integer. So you'd probably want to use -1. I don't know. It's a possibility. It's basically a sentinel value of some kind, right? And then if you're willing to have string sentinel values here, there's all these interesting questions of, well, what if I wanted 2 last timestamps, right? Because I have 2 scheduled queries. I want to know everything Zach did, and I want to know everything Seth did. And these are on different schedules, right? So do you basically just say, use different magic strings? We'll just auto create them. Or do you say there's one magic string, and then we'll sort of track it by the constraints that come in, right? Which is probably what evented tables do. So there are interesting questions here.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead,
You want
Daniel.
great sessions. Sorry.
Yeah, I think about that because there is some channels on the logger system. So I think about creating a key for every channel, but it's like future work, not for the first version.
If we were to go ahead with this strategy, I'd be okay with considering that future work as well, because I think we're again just saying that like we'll have to make sure it's documented. But it's not the default behavior, and it doesn't even seem like a behavior that someone could stumble into, especially if we use the string.
Well, let's be slightly more clear. What you're saying is you think it would be totally reasonable to ship a table that returns no data without any constraints now, and supports the idea of tracking the last seen timestamp using some kind of sentinel value.
Yes.
And then whether that sentinel value supports multiple invocations of it or multiple things can be considered future work.
Correct. That was exactly what I intended to say.
I think I'm good with that as well. I feel like maybe we should all sit on the idea of a sentinel value, because that is also fundamentally changing something inside Osquery, but it feels more reasonable to me than changing select star semantics. So that's my gut sense on 10 minutes of talking.
I mean, Alessandro, Charvel, like it's kind of a new pattern. We'd love to hear what you guys think, and everyone on the call, but specifically naming TSC members.
It looks like an interesting approach to solving a problem that will eventually appear in other tables as well.
Yeah, I think I jumped on the evented side of things because it seemed like we are trying to mimic this, but this is simpler and easier to implement as well. And I think this pattern makes sense where we do like where timestamp is magic string or greater than -1 or whatever. We'll have to surface this in documentation. That's it.
The documentation would be very lightweight too, because you could imagine just including this in
The
in
log,
the table
vlog,
schema.
or exactly, or
All right, table
schema.
schema, timestamp column, use -1 to get last seen. Some half sentence fragment there.
Perfect.
Kind of hits the like. You really want to understand, you probably have to go read the code. But if you just want a note about maybe, then it's there. And I think this also would probably work really well. I don't think you would need the CLI flag, the flag for max returned rows either, because that you would just be able to put that in your constraints through SQL. It doesn't get down to the generate, does it?
No, I don't think it does. It would be nice if it could.
So that means that
SQLite doesn't pass it.
if you ever included a limit, then you would drop data.
Assuming the limit was exceeded.
Yeah. Also, if you put a count, for example, in front of that, you also are moving the pointer. Yeah.
But if you are putting a limit, no, never mind. Sorry, go ahead. The limit is not passed to the table logic. Never mind.
Still might be the best we can do today. But was the command line limit you built? I haven't read the PR. I'm sorry. Was the command line, was the flag limit you built something that got passed all the way down, or is that something? You said you implemented a flag for adding a limit here.
Yeah.
How does that? How would that work for timestamp tracking? Is that sort of just does the underlying UAL API include a limit, or?
Yeah. It the flag limit the number of routes returned. It simply does that. I mean,
I'm sorry, I'm not asking a question clearly enough. Okay, 2 questions. Does the underlying macOS API support a limit?
No.
Okay.
Well,
then.
Well, the API of macOS return a pointer to which you iterate. Okay.
So you can always stop iterating.
No, it's not. It does not stop anywhere if you continue.
Okay. I think we have some interesting options then. So I think we should try very hard to avoid configuration surface for this, and I don't think you need it. If the underlying API returns an iterator, which you can then stop iterating, I would probably make an additional column for number of rows, right, which adjusts the iterator. So you have a column that says how many rows do you want? Because the thing is if you're trying to do any sort of timestamp tracking, then limit is going to hurt you, right? So you need some way of saying, please don't return 100,000 records to me. Only return 10,000 at a time, or whatever you decide your batch size is. So I think you would need to do that to a column, which the generate function then basically uses to know when it should stop iterating. And I think you kind of ultimately will need that to get your timestamp tracking to work right, which is probably what you already found, right? Because otherwise, timestamp would be the last thing fetched from the iteration, which SQLite will then truncate. So you kind of want to set your max rows returned. And that also gives you the ability to default max rows to like 100 or something. And then it becomes then your select star behavior becomes very clean looking. You select star, you get whatever the first 100 things the iterator returns are.
But I think that what you're describing, Seth, is a little bit different than what I understood from Daniel. I think that, Daniel, were you describing in your generation function that you use that command line limit? Is the limit being done in like the SQLite layer, or is it being done in the generate function?
No, in the table, I mean, the table gets a pointer for the API, and then has a loop that gets all the logs, and then send it to the SQL engine. I stopped the loop. I stopped the query on the loop itself. So for efficiency.
Right. So the purpose. So if the limit's set to 100, let's say, and there's 1,000 logs available, then you'll get the first 100, and the next time the query runs, you'll get the next 100. And so the query will have to run 10 times in order to get all 1,000. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And the reason to have the limit is because you want to avoid like huge spikes.
Yeah.
Well, I think you also, well, I guess if you wanted to keep from destroying Osquery's memory, then you would need some kind of limitation there, ideally at the generate level.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, in theory, if you're running this query often enough and you want to eventually get all of the logs, then it doesn't matter to have the limit, because you're going to see every log once anyway. So the throughput doesn't change, but maybe you can smooth the,
Yeah.
if for some reason 10,000 logs come out, right? So yeah, so this it makes sense to me why you'd want this kind of limit. And I know we don't like CLI flags, but
Well, but the thing is, I think it makes more sense as a column value.
Seth, can you like write in the chat like what that SQL would look like? I just don't understand.
I'm writing.
Thank you. And does anyone know, is it possible to, or is this how hidden columns work? Where if someone specifies it in the constraints, yeah, so if someone specifies max rows in the constraint, do we end up with a column being selected on every row that's max rows, or does the hidden unit doesn't show up?
I'm pretty sure the hidden column does not come back on the row unless you include it in the select star, and there have been other
Yes.
times when we have been displeased with that behavior.
Okay,
Also, that kind of row will be that kind of column will be like additional and maybe hidden. Yeah.
got it. Then I like what Seth just described there. How does that sound to you, Daniel?
Yeah, it's better. Everything that is dynamic is better than the static flag.
I guess the downside, it's a small downside. Okay, well, let's just say it. I think a downside to having it in the column here is that you are shoving more data around, because you have to return the value of that column, so SQLite doesn't filter it out. So the underlying generate function will have to say max rows equals 1,000, because otherwise SQLite will say max rows is nil. That's not the same as 1,000, and drop your data. So there's
yeah.
there's
So
these funny
eventually,
things.
you're right. So when you're talking about like, it is hidden eventually when the results return. It won't be logged, but it is going to be shuffled around internally.
Yeah, there's a little bit of memory overhead there, but it feels like I don't know. Maybe it's because I mostly write extensions, but I kind of like that as an API surface more than I like configuration flags.
Definitely. And we're talking several bytes here when most of these log lines are going to be at least several dozens of bytes, if not much more than that.
Yes, but you know.
Yeah. No, but I mean fair to point it out for sure.
That's like, yeah, but it's still like 4 bytes probably, or 8 maybe for each row. So if we are going 100 row at a time, it's only 400 or 800 bytes, so not much.
Okay. I haven't taken all of the notes into the minutes yet, but I think the feeling is that we don't want select star to have magic behavior. Select star should either return 0 or just default max rows to like 100 and then call that good enough. We think we don't need configuration flags. See also max rows as a hidden column. And we're all really intrigued by the idea of a magic string for last timestamp or -1, some kind of sentinel value there. Implementation, a little bit of TBD. Is this just the last access on that, or is this, actually tracking something by query, or pick a new string if you want a new sentinel value. So lots of choices there, and I don't know what makes sense. So I think that's like we should all sort of chew on that a little bit and kind of roll with whatever and be willing to change it. Kind of neat though is maybe, I don't know, recently Stefano had like this new idiom of let's do some caching, and now we have this other new idiom, and I don't know, kind of new ground in some ways.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this, Daniel, and I'm glad that we were all able to get to something that everyone feels pretty good about.
Thank you.
I'll just need to take some notes here. I can pull this up. So there is also a agenda item here for Charvel's endpoint security FIM table.
Yep, please review. I've been addressing feedback as soon as I can. That's all. We are almost out of time, so I'll let Mike chat about the kernel panics quickly.
Mike put up a kernel panic table. I started reviewing it and didn't get very far yet. I'm sorry, Mike. But there's a kernel panics table. Probably people should review it. Do we have any panics that we can ship as test data or attach to the ticket for us to look at and understand? Could you attach them to the ticket or PRs? Like, I don't know if they should be in our source code as like parsing examples, or if they're just things that we should attach to the ticket. I don't know if people have feelings about test data versus not. Actually, I think test data is a good thing. If they're not included, can you include them somewhere, and then we can actually test the implementation against them?
What's a couple of things? What's the size? And second thing, are we using already? I mean, do we have the support for Git LFS? Because I don't think we are currently using it, and so.
Good question.
Artifacts binaries are, yeah. Eventually, we should try to. Because yeah, any artifact added to the history of Git always increases the, and there's no way to remove it unless you do some really bad stuff. Well, not bad stuff, but yeah.
If they're text though, when they're small, we can even gzip them, so that doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah.
I don't know. I assume they're like a couple of K or something. And they'll probably gzip down to tiny. I don't know. You can attach them to the ticket, and then we can evaluate or something. And that seems fine to gzip and check in to me.
I mean, even or not gzip to like 1 or 2K. We have our source code files are under 2K.
You use more files. Okay. Thank you for the implementation, Mike, too. other things people want to bring up? Otherwise, we're kind of both at time and at the end of our meeting. Okay. Thank you all. And I think this concludes today's office hours.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.